A few weeks ago, I walked into a room where a bunch of dancers were working. And it had been a while since I had the chance to do that, as my work has taken me in other directions in the last years. So I found myself in this room with these dancers. And to see this kind of community of work again, I felt this sense of relief and this kind of familiar, sharp joy to see this group of people with this common, focused, and matter-of-fact attention to these fundamental questions about motion and form and time. And also to witness what gets built when people think together physically. And at the same time, I noticed, of course, as we all know, that in dance and choreographic work, everything is just always falling apart. Right? It's falling apart, and then it gets rebuilt. It gets reformed, and dancers come together every day to try to figure out what form, what motion the world might take today. And I love dancers for this. I love how dancers can't help but notice and work with the fact of constant change. And I love this persistence of vision that dance thinking provokes. And I love the practical, carpenter-like attention to detail that dance thinking requires in this ongoing, detoured, intricate, detailed pathway that dance thinkers are creating and finding and following every day. So dancers ask questions like, all right, what is this? And how is it different from that? What do these things do? What's the mechanism? How do they function? What's the overall system within which they function? What is this, also, that we've not yet noticed? So these kind of questions that dancers ask themselves every day are the kinds of questions that allow for the presence and the action of change. In my experience, change is not something separate from what is. Real change is a deep dive into what is in order to see what might become. So I'm a practitioner in the fields of both dance and conflict engagement. And in my experience, practitioners in both fields are stepping into this messy, dynamic situation, and they're trying to figure out how these opposing forces can be held together to function as a whole. And so practitioners in both fields are working with this kind of robust curiosity that, in spite of all difficulty, in spite of whatever happens in the situation, keeps looking at the material of where we are to see what potential it holds. And this material can be anything. It can be the people, it can be the situation, the sound, the environment, the time, the politics, whatever it is. Everything is material. But as we also know, we cannot command change. We can't force change to happen. Change is a possibility that we can sense. And we can prepare the ground for it. We can prepare ourselves for it by building up our own capacity to be able to listen, to see, to think, and to act. But most of all, to move. So that when the materials of the present do propose change, we can notice it. And we can figure out what to do with it. So I've spent most of my life working as a physical thinker. Many years as a performer and a creator, and in the last years I've moved into working with conflict. And this has been a fascinating transition for me to expand my own understanding of what physical thinking can mean, what it can do. So, and this is what I find thrilling about dance and choreographic work, is that nobody knows what it can do. None of us know what it might become, which is fascinating. Every time I start working with a new group of people, and a lot of times now I'm working with people who are not trained in dance, they come up with things that I never would have thought of. So we don't know what it can become. We know what it's been, but we can't know what will happen, and we cannot know how the changes that are going to come will deepen and expand our understanding of what it can mean to move, and what the process of organizing ideas physically, which is the work of dance and choreography, organizing ideas physically, what this can make possible. So I see dance and choreographic work as a highly developed human technology for thinking and acting. And like any human technology, our work can be both constructive or it can also be destructive. So we can use our capacity to think physically and create physically to organize a fascist spectacle that will promote violence. Or we can create a connection between divided people. Or we can create a situation where people find themselves reflecting on things they hadn't thought of. Or a way for people to connect more strongly to how they are alive. So the kinds of change that we're part of, or that we help to promote, have to do with our own intention. What kind of questions are we asking in our work? What kind of situations are we inviting people into? Why do we want change? Because change on its own is not transformative. Change can also just be a way of keeping us stuck, keeping us where we are. Transformative change emerges from deep listening, in my experience, deep listening to the materials of the present, to the ideas, peoples, actions, environments. Listening to what the present is telling us is necessary and is possible. So in dance and conflict, I see transformative change happening when we build up our ability to be able to let go again and again, to let go of the things that we've been hanging on to, the strategies that we thought about how things need to be, what they need to look like. And instead go back to asking ourselves these fundamental dancer questions. All right, what moves? How does it move? Why does it move? And what does that say about what we haven't noticed yet about this situation? Not what's going to be a totally different thing, but what is in this situation that we haven't seen yet? So I see conflict, and the inside of art often feels the same way, as a place of possibility. And it's in part my work as a dancer that has helped me learn how to sit more easily inside of difficulty and to imagine that motion is possible even when it seems like everything's stuck and impossible. And of course, often frustratingly, it's these very points of stuckness where something new emerges. And this is partly what I love about physical thinking. I don't always love it in that moment when I'm stuck, but I love eventually to notice that when I do get stuck, when I'm working physically, when I'm trying to think through something or create something or realize something, when I get stuck, I can be sure that it's because I wasn't listening carefully enough for the answers to those dancer questions. What's moving? How is it moving? Why is it moving? What else is this that we haven't yet noticed? So when things fail, it's usually because I haven't been listening to what's possible, which is fantastic. This is fantastic because it means that it has to do with what's in the room. It doesn't have to do with me. It's not me creating the thing. It's me as a point of listening to what's possible. So I can always refocus my listening. I can always try to reconnect with what is in order to see what might happen. So this doesn't mean that I am personally responsible for fixing a situation, or that I can fix it, or that every situation needs a solution. What it means is that as things continue to fall apart and reform, through my practice, I can be part of the world remaking itself every day. So it's not this fixed pathway that we're looking for as dance thinkers and conflict thinkers. It's not the one right pathway that we're finally going to figure out and get it together. It's this practice of being just right in the middle of whatever mess we find ourselves in, and listening with more and more accurate hearing to how what is becoming what will be. So it brings us back to this question. What is this also that we haven't noticed yet? And I've asked myself this question a lot in my new work, and some of the ways that I've been thinking about it are through projects that integrate choreographic thinking with conflict engagement practices in order to create large-scale public dialogues. And so I collaborate with communities internationally on these projects to create physical strategies, formats, and environments that people can use to communicate and reflect and exchange on difficult topics like violence, for example. And as I'm working on these projects, one of the things that I'm thinking about, please come in. As I'm working on these projects, one of the things I'm thinking about are the categories of action that are always in place in any participatory event, whether it's us sitting in this room or a performance or walking into a bank or sitting at home with your family. Any situation where people are participating, there are these categories of action that are in place, and decisions are always being made within those categories, whether we're conscious of it or not. And this is one of the things that dancers practice, is noticing and making decisions within categories of action. So these categories impact spatial, temporal, rhythmical.
Interrupting, but I have a problem with the sound. Okay, weil das Rausch auf der rechten Seite.
Ist nicht schön, sorry.
There we go. Okay. All right, so we have dancers, right? Okay, so this is classic, right? So we have dancers. They come into a situation like this. They have this big plan, and then everything falls apart. And then within that, then they can say, oh, okay, what am I riding within that? Not what did I have in mind, like how am I going to do it, but what's happening within this? So what decisions are being made? What decisions can I make? And the decisions that we're making in these categories of action influence spatial, how we're organized in space, temporal, the rhythmical, the formal, the relational, the internally felt aspects of human interaction. And some of the ways that some of the projects that have come out of this for me include one called Knot on Knot, where we gave meaning to spatial positions. So if you're there and you're there, that means something different about what you believe in a conversation about immigration. Or a violence recode that uses physical postures as a way to explore structural violence, so a way to take on the position of others. Or the exchange, which I created with the Michael Douglas Collective, that uses walking together, gestures, and the direction of attention to create physical research into violence. Or my current project called Understand, which uses physical interviews, so interviews that take place only through the body, non-danced, physical interviews in order to open up a dialogue on racism. So one primary thing that I've learned in the process of this is that when we are not sure if it's possible to connect, when we don't know if we can really communicate and exchange about our experience, when we're afraid, we doubt, and we're afraid that we might transgress if we even try, then the body becomes a place where that communication is much more possible. And at first I used to think that people who were not dance-oriented wouldn't be willing to move, but actually they're relieved because it's a way for the people to come together that doesn't require them to get up in a microphone and say, hello, I think racism is bad, but instead to open up a more nuanced field of communication around that. So it becomes this place where we can illuminate through our bodies the richness of how different we are, how we can acknowledge each other's humanity, and how we can start to explore these tricky waters of borders and access and meaning. So a few years ago, I started interviewing my dance colleagues, my performance colleagues, with the question, what do you practice? And I was asking them, what do you practice physically, but also what are you practicing as you practice that? Because I think that the work of dancers is undervalued, and I think it's underseen, and I don't think it's understood very well, what it is that dancers are doing. But I see it, and I value it, and I want to understand it better. So what I've learned so far in my experience and from my colleagues is that the practice of physical thinking is by necessity both practical. It's every day, it's ongoing, and it's also transformative. So the dancer is dilating all the time between these experiences of the daily and the transformative. It's rigorous, it's freeing, it's confusing, and it's frustrating, and it's pedestrian, and it's virtuosic, and it's thrilling, and it's scientific, and it's visionary, and it's necessary, because it's always already happening. So the work of dance and choreographic practitioners is to prepare their minds for the rigors of inquiry, for the challenge of asking questions physically, and of trying to come up with answers physically. And they do it with this ever-awake, ever-listening body. Dancers are researchers, explorers, builders, excavationists, demolitionists in this ongoing physical thinking that's constantly shaping the world. And the frustrating fact that the body itself is always changing, is always letting go. And that we need to, as we reapproach ideas every day, we need to physically renew ourselves. That very frustrating fact is also what builds into dance practitioners the capacity to keep listening for what might be born, and builds into them the determination and the power to carry on and carry out change, even in difficult situations. So this doesn't mean, of course, that we're all ready for change, or that we agree on which change should happen, or that we know what we need to know in order to help change happen, or even that we want to be part of change. What it means is that change is already always happening, and that our practice is one that can help us notice where it might emerge and help what will be arise out of what is, because this is where it starts. Literally anywhere. Change starts from where we're alive now. It doesn't start from the past, it can't start from the future, it starts from wherever we are alive now, each person. So the work of dance thinkers, as I see it, is to be witness to and participant in motion. To enable and find and ride the possibilities, and then to research, to get into trouble, to get lost, to learn new things, to apparently fail over and over, to let each other try, to let each other fail, to help each other succeed, and then just to run with each other alongside the world in this heartbreaking, breathtaking, beautiful surging that is the physical world. So dance thinkers come together. They think about details. They think about structure, so that when they do begin to run together, they can speak of these gorgeous and necessary and simple things that make up motion. Dance thinkers run with the world, in whatever form that takes, and they create ways for others to do the same. So, of course, it's not always easy to create change, because the pathway to it is not obvious. There's often resistance, and because what is and what has been can feel so permanent. Because of what it's given us, we can also become afraid of letting it go. What has been and what is has given us so much richness that we can fear what might be lost. So it's a good thing that the body is so relentlessly alive, that the body is so just ruthless in giving us this alive practice that we carry on. The body both always remembers and lets go every day. So physical thinking, the practice of physical thinking is not a straight line, and there's no kind of inexorable progress forward. Dancers come together so that they can speak of these things, so that they have the skill and the capacity to see and act with clarity, and the bravery and the practice and the community and the knowledge of brevity and duration that lets them speak of change, that lets them let go of rigidity, lets them let go of the hope of things lasting, and lets them breathe in the fact that change is always already happening, and lets them breathe out the motion that is this incomprehensibly lovely and surprising basis of our very, very brief stay here on this earth. So motion is the basis of life. And dancers are some of the only people on earth who spend most of their life researching what it is to move. And I think this is really important. In this time of so much violence, so much polarization, when it can often seem difficult or even dangerous to create situations of connection, situations of contact, I think it's wildly important. I think it's wildly valuable to keep developing these methods of physical communication, to keep examining them, what they do, how they work, and for us all as a field, to keep moving with joy into the fact that we don't know what's going to happen, to let it unfold as it needs to unfold. And the very ephemerality of it, the fact that we can't describe it very well, that the heart-pounding thrill of it all, and the struggle of the hard work, and this deep rhythm of generational practice that dancers are carrying on, and the action blocks that get built through that work, all of this work that dance thinkers do is a fundamental part of the work of humanity. We are physical beings, and we think through motion. And through motion, we're always speaking about life. So our practices are already always changing, and they always have been. There was no point where things started and where they just stayed. There's only been motion. So the root of our practice, which is to ask, what moves? How does it move? Why does it move? What is there in this that we've not yet noticed? This practice of living in motion, in the very heartbeat of the world. This fundamental practice is a wellspring from which transformational change can emerge. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dana. And I think it was a very engaging keynote you gave us, and it makes, for me, it was very touching because it made conscious that we have such a huge repertoire to really do something, even we don't know exactly what it is, and also that we struggle sometimes with the wording, that we are looking for words and sometimes not being able to express, but we know what it is, and this we can share. And I would love to open for any questions, and if there are any questions or notes or comments, please feel free to talk to us.
Thank you very much. This was very inspiring. I would like to ask you the question, how do you really get in touch with the people who feel excluded from our society? So if I would think about political dimensions, we see that there is a part of the society that's involved in globalism, whilst it's also producing others that feel excluded. Yeah. And my question is, how do you reach them? I mean, if people come to your projects, wonderful, but aren't those the people who are open anyway because they participate? So how do you reach the people that you normally don't reach?
Yeah, this is a great question because it's one of the, I would say it's 90% of the work is to bring together people who normally wouldn't ever show up to something. I mean, I wouldn't show up if I saw a poster that said, a social action on racism, a choreograph, I probably wouldn't go because I would be afraid. So it's difficult to engage people. So what I do is, because I'm often also going to cities and places that I'm not from, I only go if I have very strong local partners who have a strong network of people in different communities, because it otherwise doesn't make sense to me. So I really rely on that, on local partners, and consciously reaching out to, oftentimes it's helpful to go to the heads of groups or churches or whatever it is, the communities where people come together, and to get those people on board so that they say, okay, and then they can tell their people who trust them. So it's a trust, it's like a trust network that has to be built.
So do you really have nationalists, racists in your project that really have like a stand there and say like, I'm against you, you and you, but you still participate in your project?
I have, yeah. Actually in Dresden we had a project, and my project partners brought people in who initially came in the room and they saw there was some young men they're from the Middle East, and they walked in and they saw them. They said, "What are they doing here? We're not coming in." But they convinced them to stay. And in the course of the project, I create non-confrontational, because everybody, like, we have enough of that. It doesn't do anything. And what happened with that? By the end, they said, "Ja, die sind nicht so schlimm." And so change does happen. Of course, my goal is not that I'm going to change everybody and fix it, but I want to open places where I don't have a standpoint. I'm not saying I'm pro this and anti this. I'm saying what's a place where people can come together. So it's challenging, but it is possible.
Thanks for that, and I have a lot of ideas in my mind, but I just wanted to add shortly that the exchange project you did with Michael Douglas Collective was shown and performed in Arnsberg via Tanzland. Arnsberg is a small city in the Sauerland here in North Rhine-Westphalia. It's a little bit in the outskirts, and the people appreciated this project very much. They are far away from like formal discussion on art and theory, but it was a very easy approach. They loved it, and I loved this very, very concentrated and very open atmosphere that emerged in this space because of this very special project. So it worked, and it was a wonderful experience for all of us. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so, and I'm interested also I'm not interested in having my opinion out there. Recently, for example, I've been working on a project that's taking place with a group of Maasai in Africa who want to better understand the idea of what birth control might be about. And so we're creating a physical environment where that gets explored. And so I'm reaching out to people who are working with people who might be interested, which is always, it's a challenge, but it's interesting, yeah.
You pointed out very well the importance of the here and now, to be in a moment, open to the next coming for change, and be open to the different categories of your body, of your spirit, of the space, of other people, etc. What is so special for dancers, and especially improvising and open dancers, to be able to do this? And what do you do if they are blocked off in different categories of this? How do you support them to overcome?
Dancers? Yes. Or the people who I'm working with?
People you are working with.
So I don't expect them to do that. I think that's my work. That's the choreographic work, is to create a framework that allows them to just step into it and to have an experience and to be able to communicate. So sometimes if I'm working, I do sometimes do projects where I do workshops where I work with people who want to create. And then it's really just a matter of saying, all right, let's go here, like, what's that? Oh, why did that happen? Okay, well, let's see, what were the decisions that were made that created that phenomena? So it's really kind of this matter of keep looking at where you run into trouble. If we try something out and it feels awkward, then we stop and say, okay, so what felt weird about that, and why did it feel weird? All right, let's try it this way. So it's really an ongoing research, because I don't know. I can keep trying to know and keep trying things out, but it's this kind of curiosity. And when people get stuck, then it's really just a matter of saying, okay, wow, it looks like we're really stuck right now. Let's take a step back. Okay, let's go. Let's try it again. So what was happening there? So it's this ability and willingness to let stuckness be there because it's there for a reason. It's telling us something. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Dana. I've got a question. You talked about the physical interviews on racism, and I was wondering, how do you see the difference between physicality, in a more broader sense, and dance and dancing? Because I felt there is a difference between that, probably also in relation to the groups you're working with.
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
I think that behind both things, it's the same work. So this idea of physical thinking stands both behind those kind of projects and dancing, and they're just different like ways of it for it to emerge. The reason that I'm not doing something that most people would identify as dancing is that most people are like, oh my God, like, am I going to have to do interpretive dance? So I try not to do anything that would make people uncomfortable. But I don't, for example, so I spent many years as a dancer. And the feeling inside of that is this feeling of navigating all these different fields of textures and ideas and these categories of action. And I feel like that's what I'm doing when I work to create these projects. But I'm just doing it on a longer temporal scale. And I'm not doing it necessarily with my own body. Yeah.
How do you deal with the fact that a lot of people think communication or social interaction is done by only this
Digital.
Yeah. Do you convince people, or you just ignore it, or?
Well, the things I've been creating are really these body-to-body events. So I think that's what people are invited into. And actually, I've tried to build in technology. Sometimes it didn't work very well, but maybe it'll work in the future. I don't know. There's probably ways. But I think the body's present it's present in the digital too. It's just a different. I don't think I'm the person who's going to figure that one out because I'm not digital native, you know?
Any more questions? Any more comments? So, thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.